My name is Jamie Stickle, and I am the Main Street Manager for the City of Canby. I am honored to be with you on this momentous occasion. An unknown author once said, "Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them." Today, we honor them. Building a Better Community is Canby's Women's Heritage Trail dedicated to the accomplishments of women, the first in its kind in Oregon. It seemed only fitting to couple this trail with Women's History Month, which occurs nationwide during the month of March. Many people have come together to work diligently on this project, both women and men, young and not quite as young, yet each bringing a unique mindset and skill set to help tell our story. This project was a partnership between the city's Heritage and Landmark Commission, Canby Kiwanis, the Canby Public Library, and the Canby School District. I thank you for joining me to help honor a handful of Canby's many strong women who helped lay the framework for the city as we now know it. Now please help me in welcoming one of my favorite strong women, Chair of the Heritage and Landmark Commission, Carol Palmer.
Well, this is a great crowd, and thank you all for coming today and helping us launch an Oregon First, the Building a Better Community, the Canby Women's Heritage Trail. The women featured here, first of all, are in the photos around you today, and as you walked into the City Hall. They made significant contributions to the development of the community, both economically, culturally, socially, and politically. They were rarely one-dimensional in terms of their activism. They made a difference in multiple ways. Myra Weston, let's see, Myra's right over there, was not only the co-owner of the Canby Herald, she was also the chief reporter, the editor, and in her spare time, she assigned herself the duty of being the city historian. The hours and hours of research she did has left a wonderful legacy for us in terms of knowing the roots and the history of our community. She was also not only the historian, not only the reporter, she was also the person who led the city charges in terms of making sure that the Canby Ferry was relaunched in 1953. In 1966, she amazingly got a new tax base passed in this city. And in addition, in her spare time, she also served as secretary of the Chamber of Commerce. And by the way, she was also the city treasurer for a while. And I could go on and on and on if I don't hit the microphone. And actually, for every one of these women, it was very, very difficult to condense their stories into a brochure, which I hope you all picked up at the front as you came in. It's also important to note that for many of these women, community service was not a short-term event. They spent decades working for a better community, sometimes a lifetime. For example, Laura Knight Bear was one of the organizers of the Canby Women's Civic Club in 1924. She served for 40 years as the treasurer, and she was there at the very last meeting in 1964. She was also a lifetime member and activist with the Methodist Church. Some of the women are like the woman you saw on the easel as you walked in the door. That would be Bertha Dedman, affected change by breaking gender barriers. Bertha was the first woman to serve in the position of mayor in this town. But other women also served in more traditional roles, such as Hazel Vineyard, who was active in civic affairs, in betterment of the community, but also in traditional work like charity and her church work. It is important to note that these 9 women are representative of hundreds and hundreds of women who contributed to the community. And many times we don't know their stories because they went unrecognized or unrecorded. But for most of them, it wasn't about being recognized or getting their stories recorded. And I'm going to read you a quote from Elsie Cutsworth when she was asked about what she and her activist peers thought about their contributions to Canby, and she said, "We just thought we had a duty to do it, and we went out and did it." So I will leave you with that, and I want to thank Lizzie and the Berthas and the Lauras and the Idas and all of those women who left us with the legacy of a better community. Thank you. And it is my pleasure to introduce our mayor, Brian Hodson.
Well, good afternoon. This is an incredible turnout. I am so very pleased. I think we're all very pleased at the turnout. So thank you all very, very much for coming here. We are very excited to launch Oregon's very first heritage trail that is dedicated solely to the women that have made Canby as great as it is. This project has been in progress for over 2 years. And although the Heritage and Landmark Commission took the lead on this would not have happened without the support and involvement of the Canby Public Library staff, Canby Kiwanis Club, Canby School District, and the Canby Historical Society. This was very much a collaborative effort to make this happen. As you might have heard, an important part of this project was a citywide essay contest for secondary and elementary students. I had the distinct pleasure of being part of the judging panel and reading the almost, did we have over 100 essays? 130. 130 essays that were submitted. And some of them, those students are here today. So thank you guys. My fellow judges in that small feat were County Commissioner Martha Schrader, Jim Mattis of the Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition, Chrissy Curran of the State Heritage Organization, Irene Green and Angelica Novoa de Cordero from our library, Kay Huston and Luana Hill from the Canby Kiwanis Club. So thank you to them for helping us judge some very, very good essays. Today, helping us to launch Oregon's first Women's Heritage Trail is the state's first woman to serve in its highest elected position, Barbara Roberts. Prior to her tenure as governor, she served in public office for 24 years as a school board member, community college board member, county commissioner, Oregon State Representative, and Oregon Secretary of State. Barbara began her public service as an unpaid legislative advocate for disabled children. She was successful in securing passage of one of the first special education laws in the nation that served children with emotional disorders. Over the past 40 years, Governor Roberts has served on over 35 nonprofit boards. It is my pleasure to welcome Governor Barbara Roberts.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think Mayor Hudson is really brave to admit that he judged a contest with winners and losers in the room who may not agree with everything he did. That takes a lot of bravery. So anyway, I am so happy to be here today as your community celebrates your new Canby Women's Heritage Trail. And as was mentioned earlier, how appropriate that today's celebration takes place in March, the National Women's History Month. How wonderful and appropriate that it is that Canby is recognizing and honoring some of your early women leaders and what I describe as community builders, preserving their history for the generations that follow. I often speak on the subject of the roles of women and how they have played those roles in Oregon history. But if you picked up an early history book on the history of our country, you would find that it did an inadequate job of capturing the history west of Chicago. They didn't know we were here. Most history books written in that early period were written on the East Coast, and they did a very poor job of telling the history of the Western states. And especially neglected were the women of the West. With few exceptions, the females from this part of the nation were simply shadows, without names, without stories. But there are two notable exceptions to that preserving of Western history. Looking all the way back in Oregon history among our native tribes, it was their women who were most often the storytellers who passed on the centuries-old tales of their people and their lands. They made certain that that history was preserved. In more modern times, tribal women have usually been the only remaining speakers of their tribe's native tongues. They have taught young tribal members those languages to make certain that they were not lost forever. Following the centuries of Western tribes, the 1840s and the 1850s brought a new wave of population into the Western territories of this country. The pioneers who traveled across half a continent included women like those of the Oregon Trail. Uprooted from life in the East and the Midwest, they left everything they had known to venture into unknown lands and an unknown new life. The diaries of those difficult treks, a journey lasting about 6 months, were written almost entirely by the women and the teenage girls of those wagon trains. They recorded the challenges, the births, the deaths, the hardships, and the hopes. They preserved that history, that first-hand account of the trails west, for all the generations that followed. First-hand accounts have an ability to not only record history, not only teach and educate, but to transport the reader back to another place, another time, another experience. I never look at those diaries that are housed at Oregon Historical Society without feeling the experience of my great-great-grandparents, James and Almeda Boggs, who with their 3 children came west on the Oregon Trail in 1853. They buried a daughter beside the trail. I have walked on the land-grant acres that they farmed near Roseburg. I have stood before their double headstone in a pioneer cemetery in Winston in southern Oregon. History does not sit on a dusty shelf when it becomes family. And when my great-great-grandparents arrived in Oregon, like thousands of other families, the women of the trail most often worked side by side with their men to establish the first farms out of the wilderness. And in those early years, it was most often the women of the trail who founded the first schools and the first churches and the first orphanages and the first libraries. Those women cemented our history both as pioneers and as community builders. Although history books seldom recognize those women community builders, Canby is today correcting that oversight. Canby's Women's Heritage Trail is honoring your amazing community builders. As farming areas became active communities, other changes took place for Oregon women. In 1912, after more than 4 decades of tireless effort and 5 earlier ballot defeats, Oregon women finally gained the right to vote. With that 1912 vote, Oregon women joined the women of Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, and Washington State in securing the right to vote. The women of these 6 western states gained this right when the men of their states led this nation in bringing that voting right to both genders in their states. It would be another 8 years before American women would win the right nationally in 1920. And we always must remember that wasn't every woman, not Japanese women, not women of color, not Chinese women, not Native American women. There were women who did not gain that vote for many years. That history for women, that 1920 piece of history, that 19th Amendment, was definitely recorded, finally, from coast to coast. In 1920, women finally made the history books. So today, every place you look in our western states, our women are making history and taking leadership roles. When I compare that view of today's women's landscape with the one that I experienced and witnessed as a girl, it is literally oceans apart. As a young girl growing up in small-town Oregon, I had no women role models to follow. No women mayors or city council members, no county commissioners, no women legislators, not even a woman school principal in my town, and not even a woman business owner in my town. It was a small town, but not that small. Sheridan at the time was less than 2,000 people, and if you compared it, I think you're about 17,000 mayor here now, about that, something like that. So you can see 2,000 compared to the size, it was small. But let me share with you my first experience with inspiration regarding women leaders. This story may bring you some understanding of my strong belief in sharing history and telling the stories for the generations that follow. I remember as a Girl Scout working toward a merit badge in women's history. In my very small community library, and I mean very small, I read. I read about Susan B. Anthony and Eleanor Roosevelt, about Helen Keller and Clara Barton and Amelia Earhart. These were amazing women, women leaders, risk takers, voices for change. I'd never read anything like that before. These limited stories of early women leaders were enough to give me a look at possibilities for women. Well, they may have given me something to think about. They perhaps even gave me something to dream about. My library gave me the role models my community lacked. Role models matter. Recorded history matters. First-hand accounts give you lessons, give you inspiration, give you belief that you can make a difference, that you can actually make history. Canby's Women's Heritage Trail is making those early women role models visible to the young people of your community, and they are your future history makers. As you can tell, I believe it is important to become informed about the deep and broad history of women's leadership. The more those stories are recorded and then shared, the more inspiration and success will come to new women leaders, to our daughters and our granddaughters. This knowledge can change expectations. It helps us to understand leadership when we see it through what is today's newer lens of women actually leading. History is meant not to sit on a shelf, as I mentioned earlier, gathering dust, but is to talk about, to read, to think about, and to celebrate as you are doing today. And without the research and commitment to history that your community has demonstrated with this Heritage Trail, that history could well have been lost forever. It is in that vein that I took on a project of personal importance and Oregon historical significance. A decade ago, I undertook a project that only a few elected women in our country had completed. I decided to write an autobiography, one that included my 4 years as Oregon's governor. Now, at the time, Governor Madeline Kunin of the state of Vermont was the only female governor in our country to have put her life story in writing. Her book, Living a Political Life, was published in 1994. A decade later, no other woman governor had completed her autobiography. Now, as one of America's first 10 women governors, I was becoming a little alarmed that our place in history would basically go unrecorded, told perhaps by others, but not by the women who politically pioneered those governors' offices. This history was waiting to be told, like the tribal storytellers and the writers of the Oregon Trail diaries. This history of these political pioneers needed to be captured for the future. I began to feel an obligation, a need to tell my story and to share a piece, and this is just a piece of the puzzle that helps complete the picture of America's early women governors. I started with this huge writing project with the idea that actually this book could be a cinch. After all, I was there for every day of my life. All I had to do was put it on paper. Well, surprise. After more than 5 years of work, I recognized I had been traveling an emotional road, unpacking the boxes of my life. I had become part storyteller and part self-therapist. So, it's getting very close, that glass of water, watch out. This is the finished project, 5 years of work and research, and I'm very proud to have done the work that it took to make this history available. I have recorded my life and my history as Oregon's first woman governor. My book was published by Oregon State University Press, and the fact-checking and indexing were done by the Women's Leadership Center at Portland State University, 2 universities working together to help me complete the project and make sure of its accuracy. They really wanted that. It was released in 2011, and I am so happy to be joined now in this history-capturing effort by 4 other Oregon women history makers, and I want to show you their books because this, well, there, too much paper and not enough hands here. So let me find this little piece I want to share with you here. Oh, here it is. So these are 4 books that help tell Oregon's women's leadership history. This book was published also by OSU Press. This is State Senator Avell Gordley, Oregon's first female African-American legislator. And the title of this is Remembering the Power of Words. And believe me, this is a very good read. The second book I want to show you is entitled With Grit and by Grace. And this is the autobiography of Justice Betty Roberts, a mother of 4 who became the first woman to serve on the Oregon Supreme Court. The next book, very recently published and released, this is the story of former Oregon Secretary of State Norma Paulus, who was the first woman in our state elected to a statewide office. Now, all of these books I've just shown you were published by Oregon State University Press. This was published on a different publisher, but I want to talk about this a minute. This is a book called Standing Tall by Catherine Harrison, longtime tribal leader of the Grand Round Tribe. And it's especially an amazing book. First of all, Standing Tall, the title I love because Catherine's barely 4'11", and I think she did that on purpose. And it is an amazing read, but the early part of her life in so many ways, I don't know any other word to use, but brutal. She had a very, very difficult early life. And this is a piece of Oregon history you should read. I recommend that you do that.
What's the name of your book?
Huh?
You didn't tell
Oh,
us.
my book is, gee, what is the name of my book? It's called Up the Capitol Steps. Now, there was a lot of history preserved in those four books, 5 books counting mine. So as I travel across Oregon for business and for pleasure, I have many opportunities to deliver speeches and book readings. And I've started carrying this group of books with me to audiences, the League of Women Voters when I speak, American Association of University Women, Rotary groups, Kiwanis groups, and I have in this process coined a new phrase, not what's in your wallet, but what's in your library. In Pendleton at a speech, I raised that question, and soon the American Association of University Women in Pendleton provided copies of all of these books for their city library, their community college library, their high school, and their junior middle high school libraries. The same thing happened in Newport. So I'm just going to keep asking that question, what's in your library, to make sure you don't have libraries that have these books missing from them. Bravo. So it is that recognition of history and respect of history and women's history that create this gathering we have here today. Let me close by saying I have lived in an amazing period of women's history in America. I have been both witness and participant. I've made a little history, and now I have shared that history in my book. I am not unique, but my story is. I will continue to share not only my story, but the story of so many women who have made history, the women of the trail, the tribal women, the suffragists, early elected women, our first statewide candidates. I just think of it as out of the shadows, names, dates, photos, stories, history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor Roberts. Our next speaker is Tony Crawford. He is the Vice Chair of the City of Canby's Heritage and Landmark Commission. And as a former teacher, most of you either had him as a teacher, your children had him as a teacher, you know the good work that he did in our community. And he reminds us, while we look backward at our history, to also look forward to our children. And so he will come up next to speak a little bit about our Women's Heritage Trail essay contest. Tony.
Thank you, Jamie. Good afternoon. As you heard, my name is Tony Crawford. I am a retired Canby teacher, and I am proud to serve our community as a member of the Heritage and Landmarks Commission. As we began our planning for the Women's Heritage Trail, our commission recognized we possessed a unique opportunity to invite Canby's students to not only report on a part of our community's history, but to help make history at the same time. With this in mind, the Heritage and Landmarks Commission, in partnership with the Canby Public Library and Canby Kiwanis, announced an essay contest asking students to write about the woman who inspires me. I am pleased to report we received 130 essays from Canby students, and I especially want to thank teachers from Trost, Lee, Knight, and Karis Elementary Schools for including the essay contest as a part of their curriculum. I am also pleased to announce that each essay received will be published in a book that will be stored here at the Canby Public Library. Yes, each student can say, I am a published author. Our book of student essays will help commemorate today's historic event as the stories of the women recognized by our student authors become a part of our community's written record. Now, I want to say well done, students, and I want the students to know this is a big deal, okay? So all students who submitted an essay, would you either stand, or if you're already standing, raise your hand. please. Let us know who you are. Stand up, please. Okay, you can sit down now. The 130 student essays were read by a panel of celebrity judges after, you've heard about this, after careful deliberation, the judges selected 12 essays of distinction. The authors of the essays of distinction are seated here with us today. In a moment, we will award each student author with a certificate and a medallion. Now, before we present the awards, I will ask two of our student authors to read their essays. First, we will hear from Michelle Barajas Lorenzo, a student at Trost Elementary School. Michelle will be reading her essay in Spanish language. Now, we have Angelica Novoa de Cordero from the Canby Public Library to assist with translating in English. So I want to thank Angelica, and please welcome Michelle.
Before it gets spilled.
Do you need it? No. You definitely don't.
En mi opinión, la persona que más me inspira es mi mamá porque es una mujer muy fuerte y trabajadora.
In my opinion, the person that inspires me the most is my mom, because she is a very strong and hardworking woman.
Yo considero a mi mamá una persona muy fuerte porque ella se esfuerza mucho para darnos lo que nosotras queremos, ya que ella no tuvo lo que quiso cuando era niña.
I consider that my mom is very strong since she tries to give us what we want because she didn't have what she wanted when she was a child.
Can we know whether her mom is in here?
She's not here.
She's not here.
Y otra cosa por la que mi mamá me inspira es porque ella se esfuerza mucho para que nosotros tengamos una vida mejor, ya que su vida de ella cuando era niña no fue exactamente como ella lo hubiera querido que fuera.
Another thing of why my mom inspires me is because she tries to give us a better life than hers, since her life when a little girl was not exactly as she would like it to have been.
Otra de las cosas por la cual me inspira mi mamá es porque ella es una mujer bastante trabajadora, porque aunque ella está enferma, siempre cumple con ir a trabajar.
Also, my mom inspires me because she is a very hard worker. Even if she's sick, she always goes to work.
Otra de las razones es que yo le agradezco muchísimo a mi mamá por ayudarme con mi lectura cuando yo estaba chiquita, porque ahora que estoy grande, gracias a ella, hasta ahorita mi lectura va bastante bien.
Also, my mom inspires me because she is a very hard. Oh, sorry, I messed up. Another thing why I appreciate my mom very much is because she helped me with my reading skills when I was younger. Now, I am older, and thanks to her, my reading skills are fairly good.
Por último, mi mamá me inspira porque ella cuando era niña sacaba muy buenas calificaciones y es por eso que el año que entra en middle school yo voy a echarle muchas ganas para sacar buenas calificaciones.
The last thing of why my mom inspires me is because when she was young, she got good grades. Since next year I will be at middle school, I will work hard to have good grades. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Angelica. Our second essay will be read by Nora Cordill, a student at Lee Elementary School. Please welcome Nora.
Hi, I'm Nora Cordell, and I'm going to be reading about my great-grandmother, Elsie Cutsforth. The woman who inspires me most is my great-grandmother, Elsie Josephine Egley Cutsforth. I chose her because she had a kind heart that very much cared for Canby more than anyone else I could ever meet. One of the reasons she inspires me is because she's very brave. One of the reasons of this is because when she was no older than 12, her father passed away during a farming accident. She supported her 7 of her other siblings during this tragic time. She was also brave when her little sister Edith passed away from pneumonia that same year. Her mother was grieving the most of everyone because her husband died along with her daughter. After Elsie married her husband, Glenn had my grandfather and his sisters. Elsie and Glenn were named King and Queen of Canby in 1985. Elsie inspires me because she is a leader who is never afraid to stand out in the crowd. Then, of course, the family grew and Grandpa had my 4 uncles and my mom. Then my mom married my dad and got me and my 3 other siblings. So that's the generation now. Elsie's a very determined woman that, again, is willing to do anything for our community. My grandpa told me when Elsie was first married and involved with the Lions Club in Canby, she was the only woman in our community able to vote. I was also told that when Elsie bought her first house, she didn't like the location, so she moved to a house by pulling it herself and with the help of a donkey. I really hope you enjoyed listening about my inspiring great-grandmother, Elsie Cutsforth.
Now, before we begin our awards presentation, I want to announce that all 130 students will be receiving a beautiful certificate signed by our Mayor of Canby. And I will also ask for a couple of additional people to join us up here on stage who help support the essay contest. So please, if I could ask Irene Green, Director of the Canby Public Library, to come join us. Joanne McCall, President of Canby Kiwanis Club, likewise to come join us. And Nora Clark, Director of the Canby Historical Society. You come on up and we'll have you form a line right here. We're going to form a little receiving line, and as I call the students up, they'll get a chance to come through the receiving line, and then they will receive a certificate signed by Mayor Brian Hodson, and a medallion will be presented by Governor Barbara Roberts. Now, I know what you're all wanting to know. Okay, what about the photo op? When we conclude with the last student, we will then gather everyone up here together for the commemorative group photo, all right? Okay, so please, we've heard from our first 2. Let's welcome back Michelle. Okay, Michelle, come on up here. The first one's always the tough one, so everybody else. Okay, so Michelle, what you do, come along here. Everybody's going to say, shake hands. There you go. All righty. Okay, and you know, she shouldn't do that quietly, right? You know. Okay, and then here. Alrighty. Nora Cordill.
Congratulations.
So our remaining distinguished authors from Trost Elementary School, Brianna Voss. Alyssa Ross. Zachary Lenz. Yeah, it's a little tight. Erica Mendoza Teles. Wyatt Kennemer. From Lee Elementary School, Dana Gayton Thompson. Kayla Pepper. From Karis Elementary School, Kaylee Morrison. Julia Nielsen. And our final distinguished author from Canby High School, Meridian Latig. So Meridian, why don't you stay there? And what we'll do now is we'll ask all of our distinguished authors to come gather up here, and we will strike a pose for all of you for the commemorative group photo. I do want to thank each and every one of you for your support of our student authors. Thank you so much.
All right, people in the front, talk people in the back. Wyatt, sit forward.
The mayor and the governor did a really nice job.
Good. All right, Phil. Scoot. Pretend like you like each other. Go left, go left.
Do we
need the podium?
All right.
Yes. No, we can't move. What if we shift?
Why do we shift all the way to the left?
Okay, let's see what we can. Hang on, we're going to clear some space so you can actually see the kids.
You can't, Tony, you can't move the microphone.
Can't move the
But
microphone.
we could shift the people.
Shift to the left.
How about,
Stay, everyone shift to the left.
how about if we shift towards that corner?
Great.
Because we've got stuff in this corner here, so let's go that way. Okay, everybody take 6 steps that way. You take a picture for me?
History, that's good. Or success.
Okay.
Why don't you guys,
Excellent job.
we can do more photos afterwards? And then, why don't you guys go ahead and take
If you weren't able to take a photo, I think if you go to Facebook, you'll probably find some closer there. Okay? Download one that you like.
And we can keep the kids who have won the Essays of Distinction and presented, we can keep them in here. Now that we are finished, I'm gonna invite you all to join us. We have a reception with some cookies, some coffee, water. I wanted to thank Governor Roberts, Mayor Hodson, and all of our speakers today. And I wanted to thank all of you for joining us for this momentous occasion. We're so happy that you could join us and put up with the very small room with a lot of people. Thank you so much, and go and make history.